The first presentation, as you can see, is going to be by Laurel, and she's going to talk about how she brought together her sales and billing ops team at Joyent.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today. My name is Laurel Reitman. I'm the Vice President of Business Operations at Joyent, and I've been there for a little bit over 3.5 years. I started out on the product side, so if I end up getting a little bit technical at any time, let me know and I'll stop. But my, what I'm going to go through today, if I can get the clicker to work. It's not clicking. Am I pointing the, oh, there. Oh, clicky, clicky. There, okay, excellent. I want to start off in telling you a little bit about Joyent as a business, kind of put into context what we do, what we sell. Again, how we use Zuora, and a little background about why we picked Zuora, what we were doing ahead of time, some of the challenges we were having from a business and an operations perspective. And then talk about the integration and the efficiencies and the advantages we've gotten by deploying Zuora and bringing it into our environment. So Joyent is the high-performance cloud infrastructure company. Our primary business is we provide infrastructure as a service to developers, enterprises. Our primary competitor is someone like an Amazon Web Services. So we provide a broad set of virtual infrastructure. In addition, we have a software product called Smart Data Center that we use to run our cloud, and we sell to third parties as well, so telcos and others who want to bring a cloud offering to market. In addition, we also are the corporate sponsors for Node.js, which is a server-side JavaScript runtime. We've developed our own flavor of operating system, SmartOS, which provides us some additional capabilities around virtualization to help drive efficiencies up top. And in running our own data centers, we've also had to design our own hardware. So we've got a big breadth of products, both ones that we sell as well as things like open source technologies that we're stewards of. So specifically, when we talk about the products that we bring to market, that we sell, our main is the flagship public cloud, where we're providing a wide variety of instance types, so different sizes, different types. You want some Windows, you want some Linux, small, big, SSD, kind of all sorts. We have a few different models where we take that to market. The first being on demand. So our primary business, and one of the challenges that we've had is we're on demand, we're usage-based. So a customer can sign up, buy a machine, use it for an hour, and never come back. They also, hopefully, we have many customers who come, sign up for a machine, and stay for years, but it's a very fluid environment. We recently introduced a product where they would pay in advance to get discounts over time, and so we've looked at flexibility in business models there as well. We also sell our cloud software, I mentioned that. One of the advantages to our customers of that software is that we run it in our cloud. So any bugs that we find, any issues that we find, we're seeing those before our customers are seeing those. And one of the most recent products we brought to market was our Manta service, which is an integrated storage and compute as a service. And I'll talk a little bit, that was a product that we brought to market after we launched Zuora. I'll talk a little bit about how quickly and easily it was for us to bring that into it and drive it to revenue. So we, back many years ago, we had a homegrown billing system. Don't recommend it if anyone's using one. You spend hours and hours of time on, well, there's 28 days in this month, 30 in this month, 31 over here. What about rounding, pennies, refunds, all sorts of stuff. So we had moved to a commercial billing product that just wasn't quite meeting many of our needs. There are a couple things, particularly about our implementation. One, we use NetSuite as our general ledger. So all of our accounting and finance teams work out of NetSuite. And there was no integration between the two, which meant every month close, we were running reports out of our billing system, reports out of our payment processors, manually importing all of that data in, reconciling, really slowing down the close process, adding additional people into it, just a pain point for us from an integration standpoint. For some of our customers, we would take them to revenue when we charged their credit card, but if a guy updated his credit card from his to that of the CFO, it looked like a brand new customer to us. And so looking at churn and metrics becomes a lot more difficult when you don't have that integration in place. The second was we had no integration with Salesforce. So our primary business is really a self-service e-commerce. Customers come along, they'll go and buy one or more virtual machines, but we also have a Salesforce that manages many of the larger strategic accounts. And they're doing that out of Salesforce, but they've had no visibility into, was the customer behind an AR? Where are we at with collections? How much did we actually bill that customer last month? The way that would happen is sales rep would call up someone in the finance department, 12 emails later, maybe they got an invoice. And we also had cases where our AR department was out hitting up a customer for late payment. The sales rep had no idea, got an angry call from their customer. So that lack of visibility really created a lot of friction in the business. One of the other challenges we're talking about billing ops and sales ops is we're a small company. The same person tends to do both, or sometimes we don't even have those roles in place. And so anything we can do to automate and streamline that business is really going to help us further scale. And the last was really a number of challenges around invoicing and the customer experience. So our business is usage-based. We have customers with hundreds and thousands of virtual machines. So they would get a telco-style bill. Every line item would look the same, and they would have no idea, did I actually use that? How can I reconcile it with my own internal systems? So we're really looking for a system where we could provide additional metadata to end customers, where they could get additional details. We were able to run those reports out of some of our back-end systems, but not tie it to the invoice. So they'd get one report over here, a bill over there, really reducing the customer experience. And another challenge for us, and one of the key reasons we moved to Zuora, was we're usage-based. We want to be putting in that usage every day with the vision eventually of reports and making that information back available to end customers. So we needed a system where we could pump in hundreds of thousands of usage records, process those out to create invoices as well as to do kind of mid-month reporting. So we made the decision, we went live with Zuora in April. We made the decision late last year to make this change, and we had 3 key objectives that kind of were hitting on those pain points. The first was, how do we have more flexibility in our billing models? We've done this on demand. How do we do prepays? How do we do subscriptions? How can we get more stickiness with our customers? The other was we want to bring new products to market. We knew we had this product coming out in June. How can I do that without having to find 3 engineers who have no time to bring that into the system to drive the revenue? The other was all of those manual processes. Anytime we wanted to scale the business, we want to grow. That's what everyone wants to do. Anytime you have a manual process, the only way to scale is more people. It's not cost effective. It's not very efficient, and oftentimes, when you end up with extra people in the loop, you end up with more errors, not more work done. And the other was, how do we get that visibility? How does the sales team know what's going on? How do we tie the revenue to the invoice, to the usage, so everyone across the company, as well as our customers, have visibility into what's going on in their business? Now, this is a high-level diagram of kind of how we built out the architecture. Zuora is really the heart and soul of the system. So we have our own software product, and that's, if anyone was in the meeting, the panel earlier today, that's where kind of our key customer record is. When a customer signs up, we create the identity there, and then that gets tied back one-to-one with a Zuora account. We also have our front-end e-commerce experience. So most of our customers are small credit card-based customers. They come up, they give us the credit card, they come through the experience. But we are also leveraging Salesforce and the Zuora integration there to do quotes for our larger customers. We're using Authorize.net as our payment gateway. The really nice thing is those payments flow directly from Authorize.net to Zuora. And then NetSuite is what we're using for the general ledger. And the key advantage of the integration for us is that everything is tied. So when a sales rep puts in an opportunity against an account, I can map it to the invoice later down the month. And it's going to map directly to the same account in our general ledger from a revenue standpoint. So when we're trying to do reports, when we're trying to understand the business, now everything is tied together. And instead of having people having to import this data, do all the work month to month, it's kind of fully there and integrated. So I'll show you a couple of screenshots of some of the experiences. So we have our own e-commerce web pages. We're using a lot of the Zuora APIs on the back end to do it. We'll create the accounts in our own systems. One of the things that we do is, because we want that credit card up front to allow customers to use essentially as much as they want, we're using some of the discount capabilities within Zuora to offer a free trial. So customers get up to $65 for up to 2 months. But if they happen to use $1,000 in that first month, we're happy to take the extra, $990, I can't do math, $900 from those guys. And it gives us a lot of flexibility around different promotions. We actually push everything through there. So as an employee, I have an account that I use for test, demo, and other purposes, but I get 100% discount off of that. So we're able to put all the information in, but then understand how it's used, what's charged, and have a lot of flexibility in those models. And we're using the integration with Authorize.net for payment processing. Zuora is really the heart and soul for the billing operations. That's where our billing ops folks live, where we're managing the relationship from a payment and invoicing standpoint. This is, again, my account that they're gracious enough to give me a discount on. Where it's my account, it's directly tied to our back-end systems, and it's also linked to Salesforce. So if I were a paying customer, the reps could see what subscriptions do I have, what invoices do I have. And it's directly tied to NetSuite as well. So every single one of these invoices shows up in Salesforce, it shows up in NetSuite, it shows up in Zuora. So the entire teams are now seeing exactly the same information, which helps us scale, it helps reduce the confusion, it helps reduce the friction. So this is, again, that same customer, that same account in Salesforce, where the reps can see what were the invoices, what were the payments, what's the balance on the account, what subscriptions does the customer have. They're not very pretty subscriptions because we give unique identifiers to each of our machines. Again, customers have hundreds and thousands. But an advantage is now that number that's the unique identifier across our systems, we can make that available to the end customer. So they can, in their own DevOps team, do the back of the math and make sure that things match up one-to-one for the customers. And we are able to leverage a lot of the Salesforce Zuora integration for quoting as well. So my reps used to use their own spreadsheets, their own price books. Now the quotes for my contract and term products are coming out of the exact same billing engine that I'm billing against. So I don't have to worry about them quoting some price that's going to be different than what I'm going to bill later on. Not that that's ever happened to anyone. One of the other things we were really excited about was bringing new products to market quickly. So we launched in April with our on-demand instances, our reserved instances. And just a few months later, we added some additional services. We had bandwidth charges. We wanted to outbound egress from our data centers we wanted to charge customers for. We had some extra storage products. And then we had our brand new product that we'd been working on for several years. Now, the new product, the storage service product, the engineers had done a really great job of giving me usage files. They kind of thought about it, thank goodness, from the get-go. And as a result, it probably took me 2 or 3 days from the time of starting to implementing to get that product into Zuora. So, there's all the back and forth of pricing and whatnot, but once we'd sort of established the product, the implementation time was literally days for my team to pump the usage in, get the files, and essentially be able to launch a new product in an incredibly short amount of time. For our software, we're still using some of our manual processes for that, but given a lot of the experiences that we've had with Zuora, we're really excited about the future possibilities of bringing those products into the system as well. Now, we've had a number of good experiences. There's always bumps along the way, but there's a bunch of things we're really excited about what we're going to be able to continue to do. One of the things we've really enjoyed about the product is that it's a platform. Bring new products to market quickly, try new pricing models, And so, we want to bring some training services that we offer, some professional services that we offer, additional services and products that we may think of in the future. And we know we'll be able to easily leverage that within the Zuora platform. We're using a number of the APIs within our e-commerce experience, but we want to be able to create an even richer experience. One of the original objectives we weren't able to include at launch was allowing customers to see their invoices directly into our customer portal. So that's one of the things we're working on and thinking about for future integration. And then because of the Salesforce integration, our business is very dynamic right now. We have customers who show up for hours, we have customers who show up for days, and customers who are here for years. And being able to have triggers and leverage the workflows in Salesforce to let our team know which accounts are at risk, which accounts have grown, which have shrunk, and being able to leverage all the data that's now available about the invoicing and the billing in the system is something we're really excited about for the future. So that's a number of the experiences that we've had. It's really automated and made a lot of things that we've been doing manually easier. And the whole view of the system end to end, it reduces the need to have extra people kind of relaying information back and forth, because that data is just there for everyone in the room.
The title of my presentation is Smooth Operator, and on advice of my wife, I will not be singing or acting that out for anyone. So maybe after the after party, one can, who knows at that point. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share our story with all of you. My name is Sid Ghatak. I'm with Hobsons, and I'll be talking about smoothing out our operations using Zuora. So from an agenda perspective, we'll just be going through some high-level introductions of Hobsons and myself. We'll talk about some of the challenges that we had as an organization, and then how we went about selecting Zuora. The current status of where we currently are, we're actually in an interesting situation. We're not actually yet live with Zuora. So we're 12 days away from launching our application, so we're still in the throes of our implementation and doing our data reconciliation and tie-outs and testing and such. So I can't really speak to the final benefits, but I will talk about some of the anticipated benefits that we'll have with the solution. And then finally, some lessons learned that we've learned so far, and I'm sure we'll be learning some additional lessons as we go through. So, who is Hobsons? Our mission statement is to maximize student success and institutional effectiveness to create the world changers of tomorrow. We're an education software company that provides solutions and services to K-12 schools and school districts, as well as to universities. And so we essentially want to prepare and help students make the transition from learning to life, make the most informed career decisions, make the most informed college decisions that they can, what they should major in, how that will affect their life going forward. We also work with universities to provide marketing solutions so that universities can identify, attract, retain, and enroll the best students that meet their criteria. Conversely, we also help students through an application called the Common Application apply to college, receive financial aid, and prepare themselves for the overall college experience. So from a student success perspective, our students actually are our end users of our solutions. They're not the actual customers. They're not the ones who actually buy our product. But we have to design our solutions for the challenges that they'll experience. So currently, the life preparation and college preparation activities is a very do-it-yourself activity. Students and parents together do a lot of the research and do a lot of the homework, do a lot of the exploration on their own. And what we hope to provide to them through our solutions are some additional pieces of information, additional education on how to make the best decisions possible. They're also, we realize that our end users are extremely tech savvy and are bombarded from all directions from media sources and information. So we really want to help them sort of streamline and make sense of all this information that they're getting from multiple different angles. And lastly, they're presented with a myriad of choices from what type of school to go to, whether or not they should even go to school, what career choices they should be making, how to pay for them. There are a lot of choices and a lot of decisions that need to be made in a very compressed period of time. Really, the junior and senior year of high school is when a lot of these decisions need to be made, and they obviously have life-altering effect. So we want to inform and educate and provide as much information as we can so that they can make the best decision possible. One of the challenges that students face is from a financial perspective, and that 30% of freshmen reported having financial problems that were very distracting and troublesome. And that's a real challenge because if students are worried about how they're going to pay for school, they're not as focused on the educational experience as a whole, and we really try to affect that. So that's one half of what we try to do, how we work with students. On the other side are institutions, and institutions have their own challenges at this point. And one of the key things that we're seeing, especially around higher education, our enrollment numbers are dropping. Who's going to school and how they're paying for it has been a downward trend, unfortunately. The budgets at both the K-12 and higher education institutions are constantly being pressured, and they're constantly being reduced. So they're being asked to do more with less. And lastly, from a staffing perspective, the number of teachers that are available, especially at the K through 12 space, is also dropping. So again, increasing classroom sizes, and how do you ensure that the most quality education is being delivered to students with these lower staff numbers? They're also being asked to do more. So they're being held more accountable to the outcomes and the successes. The No Child Left Behind Act, as well as other initiatives that have been placed at the state level and across the country, have placed additional pressure on universities and students and school systems to perform and improve year over year. There are also the makeup of the student body is rapidly changing, and so the diversity and equality in providing a similar homogeneous service across a diverse student population can be extremely challenging for institutions. And lastly, from a completion perspective, there's a lot of pressure on universities and K through 12 students to ensure that graduation rates stay at or increase. And so the overall completion of education is another challenge. So we see a lot of stress at the student level and a lot of stress at the institutional level, and our goal is really to provide solutions that alleviate that stress at both of those levels. So we're currently an international company. We have offices throughout the US, as well as in England and in Australia, as well as in the Far East, and we anticipate expanding our reach and expanding into further markets as we go forward. And then from a structural perspective, we're organized by division. So we have two major divisions, and this is actually quite important in terms of our Zuora implementation. We have both a K-12 division that services schools and school districts. We also have a higher education division that services universities. These are both supported along with an enrollment management service, which is a higher touch offering that we offer to universities to help students apply, enroll, and then actually succeed within schools. We also have a global sales team, an Asia-Pac division, and finally central services. And so the reason that I put this slide up here and why it's important is we have grown through acquisition. So we've acquired a lot of our applications of the K-12 space. We've acquired a lot of the applications of the higher ed space. And what that has resulted in is because of these legacy applications, we had legacy systems that came along with them. So we actually have a fully blown Salesforce instance at the K-12 space, the higher ed space, and the Asia-Pac space. And that was a real challenge as we decided to deploy, because obviously Zuora is going to interact very closely with Salesforce. So during our implementation, we actually had to do two simultaneous implementations, one that attached the K-12 instance of Salesforce, as well as one that attached the higher ed instance of Salesforce. As we go further and we do our Asia-Pac deployment, we'll also have to create another instance of Zuora to connect to Asia-Pac. After all that's done, we're actually going to be re-implementing Salesforce across the company, and we'll have to bring all those instances back together. So there are a lot of moving pieces. Not far from ideal, but we have to be pragmatic, and we are where we are. We had to make our steps in certain areas. So just a quick slide about myself in terms of who I am. Vice President of Operations, as I mentioned. Responsible for all internal systems and processes, so anything that's not customer facing essentially falls on me. So these are all the internal applications and systems that we have. I just joined in December, so I've really been only on board for about 8 months. But what we realized was the internal systems and processes that we had across the corporation really prevented us from scaling and growing to our full potential. So one of the first initiatives that I launched was what's called Hobsons 360, and this includes upgrades to essentially all of our internal systems nearly simultaneously, unfortunately. So we are upgrading our finance system, so we're implementing a new enterprise resource planning solution called Aggresso. We're also doing subscriptions management, as I mentioned, obviously with Zuora. We're about to kick off our Salesforce implementation. We're also implementing a new commission planning solution that's going to tie off, be fed from data from both Zuora and from Salesforce. We're also upgrading our HR systems from UltiPro to Workday. And finally, we have a number of other information technology projects, including email, Office 365, WebEx, and a number of other internal solutions that we're going to be upgrading. So a lot of CapEx, a lot of cap dev in this first year, but hopefully we're going to be seeing the payback on a lot of these things over time. We've been able to eliminate a lot of solutions and eliminate a lot of redundant systems, and that's helping to pay for a lot of this work. Before I joined Hobsons, I was founder and president of a consulting firm that specialized in implementing financial systems across Fortune 500 and other large organizations. So had a lot of experience with a lot of moving pieces. Not quite this many, but it's been a learning experience for all of us. So with that, let me talk a little bit about our challenges. So we are a subscription business, and so we had some challenges on each one of these. I'll go through these in a little more detail. First is a complex subscription business. We have very complex terms. We have a complex sales cycle. We have a very lengthy sales cycle. The people that we sell to, universities and school districts, are not known for their agility and quick decision-making process. So they tend to drag their feet just a little bit, and so we wind up having to tailor and modify our offerings to meet those complex terms. We're also we also have multiple product lines within the HE space and within the K-12 space, and so we often package these in new and different ways, which poses its own problems when it comes to billing time and invoicing time and how to set these up within our operational systems. And lastly, each of our applications has a services delivery component. The applications themselves don't install themselves, and so we wind up having to do quite a bit of services along with them. And that has an interesting revenue recognition challenges in and of themselves in terms of when do we recognize revenue on the services component, when do we recognize revenue on the subscription component, and making sure that's all legal and proper. As you can imagine, with the multitude of acquisitions, our data and systems are sort of all over the place. And a core challenge that we have was a fundamental inability to convert sales into revenue. We were able to monitor sales extremely well, but converting that into revenue recognition and that being the metric that our parent company is looking for, we just weren't able to do that very effectively. We also were introducing what's called our new book of business revenue model, and I'm going to hold on that for just a moment because I'll go through that in a little more detail in terms of how we wanted to look at revenue going forward. And lastly, a lack of sophistication in systems. That's just putting it mildly, because most of our data interchange was sneaker-net. So we take a file from here, walk it over to there, and walk it over to somebody else, send it through, walk it downstairs, and there was a lot of that going on. So a lot of things were printed out and highlighted, and that kind of data exchange. So that wasn't very, it was far from optimal, to say the least. So it's extremely manual processes that we had. They were also very disjointed, so that we might be selling a very similar product to very similar customers, but because of the way they were sold, or because of other complex terms, they weren't done the same way. So it prevented us from scaling, and they were also extremely inconsistent. So this was sort of the world that I inherited, and I was sort of told to just fix it. As quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. So off we went with our Zuora purchase. So I want to talk in just a moment about our subscription model. So this was a very different model than what we had been using in the past. In the past, we always worried about first-year contract value or annual contract value. That was pretty much the major metric that we used to monitor sales performance, as well as how we would monitor our overall performance. That really didn't do justice to our subscription business. And so our new CFO, he and I came from the same world of a subscriptions management book of business. So we wanted to implement these new terms. I'll go through these. These should be relatively familiar to you. So we start off with a beginning rate, and this is all on monthly recurring revenue. And the first element that we wanted to monitor was installs. What new products were installed, when were they installed, and for what dollar volume. In addition, the converse was removals. Which contracts failed to renew, which contracts were canceled, and so on, or which contracts may have canceled early. In the past, what we had done was looked at a net installs number, so we didn't have a lot of visibility into how much new elements we were selling versus new elements that we were losing. So they were all netted together. So we really had to break that apart. We had no way of doing that with our existing systems. So we built that in from the very beginning with Zuora. In addition, how much of the new sales or changes in price, changes in revenue were a result of price changes. Oftentimes, at the renewal rate, we would have a pre-contracted step-up price, or we might have a renegotiated price change. how much of that was related to price changes. And all of those netted together would get to our exit rate. So the exit rate for January obviously becomes the beginning rate for February. You run through the numbers and so on and so forth. So that's how we would monitor, that's how essentially our new book of business would appear. We also had a number of other revenue line items. So we had other recurring elements. So if you're going to take pictures, wait a couple more slides, a couple more clicks, and then you'll have the full picture up there. So just hold on just one moment. So other recurring revenue elements, other revenue items that would recur on an infrequent basis, transactional elements, and lastly, any non-recurring charges. So all of these netted together would get our final total revenue, and this final book of business is going to be the way that we're going to be managing our revenue going forward. This is completely different, a completely new terminology across the organization, completely new way of looking at our business, completely new way of managing our data. We didn't have any of this before. So the big question was, how do we recognize revenue in an automated way? And we realized that with our existing systems, that just was not going to be possible. There's no way that we would actually get there. So a couple other challenges that we have. So I mentioned before, we have complex subscriptions. One of the things that we really wanted to do with our solution was ensure that in one subscription line, be able to handle all the complexities that were negotiated as part of the sale. Again, in the past, that would require multiple billing lines, and similar as we just saw, it'd be very difficult to unwind and difficult to understand what all those lines were. So we wanted to have one clean invoice that had all of the elements for a subscription embedded within it. We also had a very complex product catalog. We had umpteen thousand, I don't even know the final number of SKUs, which was horrific. It was very difficult to get any product-related revenue reporting or sales reporting because we had so many products. So we went through a very rigorous exercise of cleaning up our product catalog. And then also the way in which it was sold was complicated. So we had multiple trials, we had free trials, we had delay billing, we had complex ownership in the fact that we would have a school district that would buy the product on behalf of the schools within that district, and the bill would get split between the two companies. Very complicated, very difficult to create these complex billing arrangements and complex ownership. And also when there was a question, who do we actually go to? Do we go back to the school who's using the application, or do we go back to the school system that purchased it for them? Extremely difficult to handle and from a customer service perspective. And lastly, our evolving subscriptions. So subscriptions, we want to include the factor of time. So over time, the subscriptions would change. We would often renew early. We would make changes to the subscription during the life of a subscription, how to properly account and affect for that. The renewals business, we didn't have a lot of visibility into our renewals, when they would occur, how much they would be renewing for, or managing that renewal process itself. So that was something we really wanted to make sure we focused on. As I mentioned, some changes midterm if they wanted to add additional prices, add additional products, remove products, change the price halfway through, adding additional services or needing additional services implementation. A lot of these changes would happen midway through. We had no way of really accounting for that except for manually. And lastly, some trigger dates. So we would have trigger dates based on service completion. So at 50% complete or 75% complete, 100% complete of our implementation, we would have various triggers that would generate additional sales that would then have to be recognized into revenue. Again, difficult stuff for us to deal with. So lastly, from an integration perspective, we're actually quite fortunate. I mean, one might think I'm sort of sick in the head for saying that we're fortunate for implementing a GL and Zuora at the same time. But we are fortunate in the fact that we were able to take 10 steps back and say, how do we want our systems, how do we want our data exchange to actually work? How do we want our GL to integrate with our subscription system and vice versa? And so we took the opportunity to really think about this from that perspective and create the best solution that we possibly could. Everything didn't go perfectly, by far from it, but I think we do have a very clean way of moving data between our systems. We also are going to be implementing, or we've also done that all the way through our solution. So all the systems that we work with, including Salesforce, because we're going to be re-implementing Salesforce, we know the data is coming from Zuora. We know that other data is going to be fed to Aggresso. We can take a very holistic view. And finally, all that results in smoother operations for billing, because billing is going to be, it was designed from that perspective in the very beginning to make sure that was as smooth as possible and as streamlined, as efficient, and concise as possible from that process. So where are we today? We really do go live in 12 days, so I'm really lucky to be here because I didn't think that was going to happen. There are a lot of daily calls, a lot of calls throughout the day to monitor progress. We are in good shape, but I think I won't be sleeping much over the next 2 weeks. We did have some initial issues with our implementation, so there was a couple of missteps in terms of, and I'll talk about that in lessons learned, but there were a couple of missteps in the initial part of the implementation. I will say that Zuora really came to the table and really invested a lot in our relationship and in making sure that we were successful, and I've been extremely pleased with the services team going forward in terms of what they were able to accomplish in a very shortened period of time, especially with where we were. So really hats off to the services team for doing a really excellent job. And then I think where we are today is that we have a true partnership with Zuora. I think we're both invested heavily in the solution as a whole, and in ensuring that we tap into all the benefits and opportunities that the solution offers going forward. Some lessons learned. Really take the time to understand your business model. It took us a long time to finalize that book of business. It wasn't something that we just sort of thought of and rolled out there. We took several months to identify exactly what we wanted to have in that book of business, how we wanted to measure revenue, how we wanted to manage it. And once we had that, it became much easier to instill those offerings within the overall solution. Leverage the sales cycle. Your sales reps are not just there to take you out to drinks and dinner and all that stuff, although they do a very good job with that. We really want to leverage the sales cycle to make sure that while you're talking about your business, talking about your requirements, you spend the time to write them down. Don't rely just on the sales team to do that. It's your responsibility to really ensure that you've captured your requirements during that process, because at that point it's sort of a blue sky open, it's a blank sheet of paper. So you can identify how you want your solutions to work at that point, and it's important to capture that so you don't lose that knowledge that's generated at that time. So documenting those requirements are really, really key. Monitoring the handoff. As with any software company, there's a sales component and a services component to Zuora. It's the customer's responsibility to make sure that the information that was presented to sales is then passed off to the customer effectively. You can rely on Zuora to do that, but really you have to take ownership of that yourself. And that goes regardless of what type of technology you're implementing. If you're implementing a new GL system, a new Salesforce system, any solution of any kind, you have to take responsibility for making sure that you've clearly articulated what you want your solution to do to the overall services team that's going to be developing that solution. That's something we didn't do as good of a job on that as we could have, and so we did suffer for that. So that's one of the big lessons that I would definitely take away from this. And then lastly, no one can emphasize this enough, is prepare your data. That's been the most challenging component without fail from an internal perspective. Our data was held in contracts that were held in Word documents that we had to literally have temps and interns come in and go through all 6,500 of our contracts to pull out all the relevant details that we needed to populate Zuora effectively. So very, very difficult, very time consuming. So don't underestimate how long it's going to take to get your data into a position in which you can then load it into Zuora. So with that, I will conclude with any questions, and I think Laurel will come up here as well.
So we have a few minutes at the end here for questions, I think about 10 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll walk the mic over to you. I think we have two here.
Yeah, my question's for Laurel.
Yeah.
Laurel, I'm curious about your integration with the actual product. You touched on the usage
Yes.
component, which I believe is automated into Zuora from your product. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, automated more or less. So
Okay.
I think, data is the most important thing, and I think Sid touched on it, and as part of the migration, our biggest time sink was in getting the kind of customer data and subscription set up. But one of the biggest challenges for us that isn't on the Zuora side, but is on our side, is making sure the usage data out of our core product is usable, straightforward, et cetera. And that's almost one of the hardest things, is because helping make sure that your engineering team understands, this is what I need, this is what it looks like. And that was a key difference for me from our sort of original product and the new product. There's these beautiful usage files with well-structured, the data exactly the way I wanted, and it was so easy to implement. But I think it's important that the team understands how important and how easy, or how much easier it can make it if they give you clean data out. I don't know if that answers it.
Absolutely. Well, I can totally understand that. And I was actually just curious on your vision for maybe the next step of product integration, if you've thought about if provisioning by Zuora is something that you guys might integrate.
Well, we probably won't do provisioning by Zuora per se, but some of the products have more financial aspects than technical aspects, so some of the prepaids and things like that. So one of the key areas of integration for us is more front-end e-commerce, where we can be either price testing, more trials, different promotions. Like right now we have a standard free trial, and I'd love for the marketing team to be able to target one set of users with maybe a more generous offer, another set with a less sophisticated. So more in the front-end e-commerce experience, I think, is the place where we'd want to do the best. And then pulling a lot of that Zuora data out for end customers, because the more we get the data out to the customers, the less they're calling up support, and more money saved by everyone.
Hi, my question is for Sid. I'm just curious from your implementation perspective. You said you have 3 different instances for Salesforce. Are they talking to one instance of Zuora, or are they talking? I mean, is Zuora talking to all those 3 instances, or have you deployed 3 different instances of Zuora?
We actually had to deploy 3 different instances of Zuora,
Okay.
one for each one of the instances of Salesforce.
Okay.
One of our next projects is to consolidate all of our Salesforce implementations into one, and at that point we'll be able to collapse all the Zuora implementations into one. So unfortunately, just because we had to pick a starting point, we not ideal by any stretch, but that's what we had to do just to get through our initial implementation.
Okay. The second question I had was, I'm just curious, as part of this launch, were you able to consolidate some of your products?
We were able to consolidate the product list. So the several thousand products, I think, went down to a couple of hundred.
Okay.
So we were able to streamline the overall products by leveraging a lot of the features that Zuora had in terms of product configuration. So by using those features, we were able to collapse our product list down to a couple of hundred.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I think that was one of the other takeaways is, the 2 places where we tried to spend the most upfront time is if you understand the business and the product catalog, that makes everything kind of on that side much easier, and then
Exactly.
not underestimating how much getting your legacy data over. Those were kind of the 2
Absolutely.
biggest time sinks.
I'm not sure if you guys are the right people to ask, but probably. It's really easy to change the product catalog, which is nice, but I'm a finance person, so I want to control it. And I'm wondering if you guys had to put governance in place, how are you managing changes, and who is going into the system and typing changes into the product catalog?
Do you want to go first?
I can go first. We're small, so it's me. And we're small, so the governance hasn't been a major issue. We haven't been making changes per se as much as we've been adding new products, and so each new product comes in as a new item in the GL. But it hasn't been an issue for us yet, but we're still small, so there's not as much challenges around control.
From our side, we actually work with finance. So finance is the one that actually owns the product configuration and the product list itself. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't blow up the way they reported and tracked and did their financial reporting. So they're the ones who actually own the product, the final product list. So that's our intent going forward. So we're not live yet, so we haven't changed anything. So we just had our initial list. So our going in intent is that the product finance will coordinate those changes to products with the product dev teams and the sales teams, and they'll be the ones who will actually be responsible for maintaining the product master. So that's our hope at least, and we'll see how long that actually holds. So.
Hi there. From a data integrations perspective, are you doing sort of a custom code point-to-point integration strategy, or using something like MuleSoft or SnapLogic for like an integration hub? Just maybe talk a little bit about why you chose the strategy you did.
Sure. We actually are doing we're doing point-to-points. It was all custom code to move the data from Zuora to Aggresso and back. We just didn't really investigate other solutions. We had the resources in-house as well to actually do that, and so they had the skill sets. So that was the main reason we did it ourselves.
I'd like to find out from anyone else in the room right now in regards to the previous question from the gal over there. Is it better to have finance own the product catalog or operations? What's worked well? What hasn't worked well? Is there a go-to person? And if there are challenges, how has anybody else worked around that so that there's none of that department conflict, so to say.
I mean, we do have a pricing committee, which is where we finalize all of our products, which includes finance, marketing, product, business operations, et cetera, because everyone needs to really understand when new products are brought to market. So the committee is sort of who owns the product list, and then the implementation is kind of handled. But I think it's critical that you need everyone to sort of know, and it probably depends on the organization where
Right.
it
I think
fits.
I actually report to the CFO, and so our CFO is I would say very hands-on and very aggressive. And so in terms of, he realized that it wasn't being done very well beforehand, which is why he wanted finance to have the lead on it. But just as Laurel mentioned, there is still integration and conversation with the rest of the organization. It just, the buck sort of stops in finance because they felt as though they're the ones who had the best depth and breadth of understanding of when changes needed to occur. Now that may change going forward, but that was our going in assumption, was that finance would be the best cops to make sure that it was as clean as possible.
I'm just curious, talk a lot about the invoicing side, the billing, the post-sales. Wondering, and as you change products, how has this impacted the pre-sales process with sales in terms of quoting and closing? Because I know that you talked about the larger deals still being handled out of Salesforce and all that kind of stuff. And then also on your side, I'm sure that a lot of heavy sales process. So how's that impacted the pre-sales process?
Well, we use the Zuora Salesforce integration. So the product catalog from Zuora gets synced over to Salesforce, and then we do the quotes and order forms out of Salesforce using the Zuora product catalog. So it's the Zuora Salesforce integration that does that for us, which is nice. I mean, the biggest benefit for me is they're not going to sell something that's not on the product catalog. They're not going to sell something at a price that's not set by essentially the finance organization. There's some limitations for us that have made it a little bit challenging because we're usage-based, so we're primarily using it for our contract-based items, because for usage, I'm not sure why the sales guys, the main reason for quoting usage is for POs and helping customers understand, so we're primarily using it for orders and contracting out of Salesforce.
I could probably answer that question a little better next year. So
Yeah.
when we actually sort of start using it. So unfortunately, we're hoping that it will be smoother, but I wouldn't be able to answer it effectively at this point.
I was just wondering if you'd see any challenges with on the sales side of limitations or changes that made to their process and how that impacted them. So.
The biggest limitation has been the usage-based stuff for us, because it works really well for subscription-based products, but for usage, because we want to sort of give them an idea of what it would look like, that's something that's taken a little bit of work for us to get kind of working the way we want. But for the 1 year and 3 year term contracts, it's super great. The product catalog comes over, they're quoting using the exact same catalog. We're doing the order entry back through Zuora because we're trying to get, we don't have any signature automation yet, but it's been working nicely. There's still some things for us to work out there, but yep. I think there's.
Actually, we're
we're
actually
fairly
just
soon.
about at the end of time here. I just wanted to give both of you a chance at the end, if you have any kind of last minute advice or like lessons that you kind of learned. If you could go back and start over, what would you have done differently, just as kind of a takeaway for the audience at the end?
Sure. I mean, I would say data without fail. Don't underestimate how difficult it is to get the data that you have in the format that you need in order to load it into the application. It's 10 times worse than your worst nightmare. So really, just don't underestimate that. That's probably the biggest takeaway that I would have.
Data and business model. I
Yeah.
mean, I think those two are the most critical. If you get them right, everything else is easy. If you get them wrong, everything else is hard. And so spending the upfront time to understand your business model, understand the catalog, and getting the data right makes everything else so much easier.